Welcome, everyone. We are so delighted to have you joining us tonight for our first homeroom on our road to May 3rd, 2024. I have to ask, how is everyone feeling today? I know it's been a while, but we are so excited to have you back in our community and to also be joined by many new partners. Now, if you could just drop your name in the chat and where you're joining us from, and to get us going, if you're able, please share with us how you're feeling about the attacks against our democracy. Are you feeling sunny, bluesy, agitated? Are you just simply on life support? Any words that describe how you're feeling at this current moment, just drop them right into the chat. We just want to get a temperature of the room and see how we might move the collective mood through the evening. We hope to use this space to network and to get to know one another and to build community. Now, while you're doing that, I would like to welcome Kimberly Crenshaw to provide some opening remarks for tonight's program. Kimberly Crenshaw is a professor of law at Columbia University and UCLA. She is also the co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum. Come on and take it away, Kim.
Hey, Kay, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to have you on. I'm excited about tonight.
I am beyond exciting. So I'm so glad to be back in community with so many folks. I see some folks in the chat who were with us all of last year. As everyone knows, we're marching forward to May 3rd, our second National Day of Action. Now, a lot of the news that we've been hearing lately has been depressing. It's been distressing. But we know from last year's experience that these convenings have been a crucial site for our activism. They help us build a much broader coalition to defend racial justice, human rights, and multiracial democracy. They tell us that we're not alone. They give us inspiration. They give us community. This year, what we're going to do with our days of action is to prepare to mark the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer 1964. So we're taking inspiration from our elders who resisted oppression through organizing, political participation, and education. For those of you who don't know, Freedom Summer was a turning point in the civil rights movement. It brought national attention to the struggle for racial justice. And because of that, to honor that, not to just look back and say, wasn't that great, but to play it forward, it's our intention that the May 3rd Day of Action will launch Freedom Summer 2024. We are hoping that in the same way that Freedom Summer was a turning point in the 60s, that it's going to be a turning point now in our efforts to defeat the efforts to impose what we consider to be minority rule. It's stretching all across every aspect of our lives, beginning with the attacks on CRT, the attacks on anti-racism, the attacks on wokeness, and now the attacks on DEI. The goal of this well-organized, and it is a well-funded faction, is effectively to erase the entire legacy of all the democratizing movements that brought us civil rights, women's rights, workers' rights, LGBTQ rights, and voters' rights. There is an effort underway now to weaponize fears of the Great Replacement in order to use those fears to dismantle our democracy. And let's face it, that side, they've racked up some pretty impressive wins. They've racked up a massive campaign to ban books. They've tried to take over some universities and have been successful. And they are vilifying and trying to eradicate DEI. So we see it in the headlines. We know that it's happening. So what are we planning to do about it? Well, what we want to do here and every Thursday in April is to ready ourselves to fight back. We want to lift up the lessons from our elders 60 years ago. And to do that, we know that a crucial part of what they taught us was that we have to come together regularly. We have to amplify. We have to strategize. We have to inspire ourselves, and we have to renew our commitments. And so that's what we're gathering to do tonight. And we'll be doing it every Thursday as we lead into Freedom Summer 2024. So each week, our homeroom will highlight a specific theme in our struggle for a multiracial democracy. Now, today's homeroom will showcase how the attacks on freedom to learn and the freedom to read, all of these are warning signs, serious warning signs about our dangerous tilt away from democracy. Now, look, it's really easy to project the deadly consequences of a disintegrating democracy upon other regions or other time periods. But the task upon us here tonight is to see ourselves in that very same light. In the United States of America, the elements of democracy's destructive descent into violence and repression is not foreign. It's packaged, it's hidden within our own history of white supremacy, of ethnic cleansing, of enduring apartheid. You know, it was Langston Hughes, the great African-American poet, who said, "We in America did not have to be told what fascism is in action. We know its theories of Nordic supremacy and economic suppression have long been realities to us." Now, these are the histories that tell us what we need to know to organize ourselves against all these efforts to take us back, to effectuate a massive U-turn in our efforts to create and maintain a real multiracial democracy. And it is precisely these histories that the anti-woke faction wants to steal from us and from our children. If there's one thing that holds us all together as we fight for our future, it is that there's no saving our democracy without saving our commitment to anti-racism. The two are conditions of each other's possibility. So the work we do leading into May 3rd and to Freedom Summer is to make these connections abundantly clear. Anti-wokeness is the Trojan horse containing the armaments that seek to destroy the rights that are fundamental to our very existence. We have to know the enemy in order to fight it. So today we have an exciting roster of guests who will help us make sense of these coordinated attacks and help us strategize to resist. But before all that, we need to get down to the brass tacks of the good, the bad, and the ugly for tonight's program. So first, let's begin with some good news. So many moments in this fight often give us a sense of deja vu, and most of the deja vus are like bad dreams. But there's one deja vu that's a little different. Little Rock Central High School, that's the school that 9 Black high school students, known as the Little Rock Nine, fought so hard to desegregate in 1957. And they did this in the face of a governor literally blocking the doors of the high school. As we all know, President Eisenhower was then forced to take control of the state's National Guard, send the soldiers to finally allow the students to enter the high school. Now, in an amazing twist of fate, Little Rock Central High School is at the center of the fight against censorship and for racial justice education in this country. On March 25th, a teacher and her students from that school sued the state of Arkansas over the ban on critical race theory in public schools, citing the ban as unconstitutional. Now, their bold act reminds us about the way that the fight continues against new efforts to create apartheid through education. So if you need an example of how the fight for our schools is the fight for our lives, this right here is it. Now, for some bad. A scholarship set up in George Floyd's name at the North Central University in Minnesota is being targeted by the right wing. The Legal Insurrection Foundation, I want you to remember that. So this Minneapolis University started the Memorial Scholarship to invest in a new generation of young Black American leaders. However, the foundation filed a complaint last week that the George Floyd Scholarship violates the Civil Rights Act. Here we're seeing again in real time the ways in which steps that were designed to open access for those of us who've been excluded are now being framed as discriminatory against those who've always been included. Now, If that makes you feel like you're living in a parallel universe, wait until you hear about the ugly. At a recent event sponsored by the Heritage Foundation called Seizing the Moment to Defeat DEI, anti-woke speakers talked about rooting out DEI from education, law, and medicine. Now, one got a lot of applause for saying Americans want doctors who study kidneys, not colonialism. Now, that might have seemed like an odd thing to say, and so we did a little digging. You see, there's been a new federal effort to address the harms from a racially biased organ test that had kept thousands of Black Americans from getting kidney transplants. Many doctors don't even know that the formula that they use kept Black patients at a lower priority on transplant lists, and it pushed them to have longer wait times for kidneys. And of course, longer wait times means higher mortality. Now there's a mandate to use equitable standards, and that's unique. There is a requirement to do right by those who've been done wrong, to look back and see who's been left off the list. And it turns out more than 14,000 people have now gotten word that they waited years longer than they should have to get a kidney. Now, remember, Black Americans are 4 times more likely to die from kidney disease. So we know that this is an example of structural racism in medical algorithms. It's a matter of life and death. Well, 2 weeks ago, House Republicans introduced a bill that would prevent medical schools with DEI programs from receiving federal funds. The bill's gotten dozens of co-sponsors, and you know who some of them are, Marjorie Taylor Greene for one. And the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, you'll hear about that a little bit more tonight, is trying to eliminate even the collection of data that uses race as a factor in the federal government, including in medical research. So if this goes into effect, the very knowledge that was uncovered about why African Americans have such a high rate of death from kidney disease would not be known. And that is the point. So look, we've seen this before, these deliberately misleading interpretations of anti-discrimination laws. That's exactly what got us in this place right now, overturning affirmative action, attacking DEI. And lastly, just like when Baltimore's mayor, Brandon Scott, was blamed for the collapse of the bridge, saying that he was a DEI mayor. He fought back, and we need to fight back. So remember, he flipped the script by saying, yes, I'm a DEI mayor, duly elected incumbent. We need to say, yes, we are the legacy of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we need to declare this message here and everywhere, even in the face of skin folk who ain't kinfolk. I think some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay, so to speak more about how the attacks against racial justice are also attacks against human rights, I'm happy to welcome one of our close partners from the Right to Learn Coalition, John Heffernan, Executive Director of the Foundation for Systemic Change. A couple of weeks ago, the Right to Learn Coalition joined forces with the Freedom to Learn Network to convene partners, stakeholders, and other concerned individuals to respond to this crisis from the perspective of racial justice, education, and human rights. John, I'm so happy to welcome you and the R2L Coalition to our homeroom. Can you tell us about who the R2L Coalition is and what brought you together to speak out against censorship and the attacks on human rights?
Sure. Thank you very much, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here. And in fact, it's an honor to be here sitting at this virtual table with all of these fellow panelists and all of you out there. As Kim said, my name is John Heffernan, and I am the board chair of an organization called Educators Institute for Human Rights. Before I say that, I can't get that visual of that massive U-turn that we need to take. For me, that's going to stick with me, that and the Trojan horse throughout this session, as well as this next week or so. Very helpful to have. Thanks, Kim. So Educators Institute for Human Rights is a DC-based organization that partners with educators around the world to end hate. We go into post-conflict society states like Rwanda, like Cambodia, like Bosnia, like the Congo, and we take the lessons of the Holocaust and these other genocidal situations like Rwanda, Bosnia, et cetera, and try to work with educators in stopping hate. When we became aware of what was happening in this country, we thought, wow, so much of what we do is look at those early warning signs. In 1937, Germany; in 1994, Rwanda; in 1990, Bosnia; in 1973, Cambodia. And we can apply them to this country here in the United States. And it was this eerily kind of strange similarity of those things that were happening in those countries that are happening right now here in the United States. And this is not hyperbole. This is about the restriction of education. This is about the restriction of freedom of expression. We decided that we would come together and we would form this coalition, the Right to Learn Coalition, and bring together largely human rights organizations, but others as well, and use that human rights framework to look at the right to education and to look at how public education writ large is being dismantled, and in turn threatening our democracy. And so what we did is we brought these organizations together, many of them, siloed and disparate, yet all well-intended, and to function and to gear their efforts toward ending what we're seeing here in the United States. And that's why we formed the Right to Learn Coalition. It's really our goal is to build this collective counterpower to combat the misinformation on the other side.
Yes, and there is so much excitement and enthusiasm for that objective of building an effective counterpower from our partners who came together a few weeks ago on March 22nd. So what is making you excited, energized about this moment and this movement that we're trying to build across human rights, civil rights, other rights-based organizations?
Kim, what's making me excited, and we saw this on March 22nd at our strategic convening, is these organizations coming from disparate places, but coming together and recognizing that, in fact, there is this sense of urgency, and recognizing that we do have to create this solidarity to create what I call, as I said, the collective counterpower. I mean, we had a breadth of organizations ranging from legacy civil rights organizations to innovative racial and social justice groups, human rights groups, parents, organizations, free expression groups, librarians associations, teachers, and teachers unions. It was incredible to see people come together. And what was most exciting about it, Kim, is that we now have this blueprint, and this is evidence of why we're here tonight. Over the next 6 months, we have concretized, we come up with concrete action items, one of which, of course, is tonight, that leads us to the freedom of summer, and of course, the election.
Yeah. And there's nothing like coming together and being enthused and then rolling up our sleeves and figuring out the what and figuring out the how. I mean, that's always the real challenge. So as we move on to Kate and Trey, let me just ask you, what is your sense about what more needs to be done, thought about, tried to bridge the gaps within the human rights community, the gaps inside and between human rights and civil rights? Where is the need, and how do we get inside of it?
Yeah, well, I think there's a great need, and I think there's a lot of work to do, and we do have to roll up our sleeves by highlighting, as I said before, the sense of urgency and the overall threat of our democracy, by underscoring that human rights of our kids are being violated and that their fundamental right to education is at stake here. And clearly there are these early warning signs. So it just doesn't happen away. It doesn't happen abroad. It doesn't happen in Rwanda, Bosnia, wherever. It's happening right here in this country. The restriction of civil and political, economic, social, and cultural rights, and that has consequences. So I think it's important also to recognize that there's a lot of work being done out there, and we need to celebrate those wins. Penn just released a report called "There Are Cracks in the Facade" in Florida that reported on the horrendous, we've all heard about Florida, right? Well, there is a lot of resistance going on in Florida right now too, and we don't hear about that. And we need to know about that, and we need to uplift those wins. But at the same time, we need that accurate information to counter the misinformation on the other side. I mean, just today, I read a report that in 2023, there was an increase of 65% of books that have been censored in libraries across the country. That's the information that we need to get out. And we need to get the information out that this is affecting our children today.
Yes, yes, that's so much an important part of understanding that this isn't just about, the next election. A lot of the coverage of Florida in particular focused on, will this help DeSantis win the nomination, as though that was the only consequence of these book bans and the effort to eliminate entire fields of study, not just critical race theory, but sociology. And so when that story was over, there's a sense that the threat is over. This threat is going to go on for generations. We're talking about our children and our children's children. So that information that you talk about, we have to find alternative ways of reaching stakeholders of democracy. And that's what is so exciting about this coalition. Thank you, John, for sharing your insights and your partnership in this. It's been an honor to be in community, and we look forward to the summer of 2024 being that line in the sand that we're all fighting for. So for more on this, I'm going to turn to welcome Trey Walk and Kate English for our warning sign segment. Kate English is the executive director of the Educators Institute for Human Rights. Trey Walk is a researcher and advocate at Human Rights Watch's U.S. program. They are both members of the R2L Coalition, which is, as I mentioned, composed of advocates and researchers who are worried about the current state of our democracy. So typically, the discussion of human rights is seen as existing out there, right? Somewhere else, not here in the United States. And this is particularly, of course, frustrating, given that it's so critical to see racial justice in America through a human rights framework. Now, this is something that Black civil rights leaders have long advocated for. Let's not forget the petitions from the National Negro Congress, the NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois to the United Nations immediately after its inception in 1945, all demanding accountability for human rights violations happening here, ranging from enslavement, Jim Crow laws, lynching, the suppression of political participation. It goes on and on. For leaders like this, civil rights have always been seen as human rights. So I'm looking forward to our next guest, who will help us understand why what is happening to American democracy is a human rights crisis. So I want to come to you first, Trey. So what does the International Human Rights Framework have to say about these anti-woke censorship bills, the war on public education that is transpiring in the United States today?
Thanks, Professor Crenshaw, for having me. It's an honor to be here tonight and to be a part of the Right to Learn Coalition and the Freedom to Learn Network, and to support this work. And I want to pick up right where you left off, because I think the point about this long tradition of Black civil rights leaders and Black radical leaders who are fighting for racial justice using the international system is something I want to kind of just start by framing this conversation with. I am disheartened by the fact, but I think it is a fact that the international human rights system is in a moment of real crisis. A lot of people's faith in the system is very low, and it's built on this kind of critique that's been there from the beginning, which is this idea that when people think about human rights, they think about it as something elsewhere, but they also think about it as something that is a tool that's mostly used by white countries, by Western countries, by wealthier countries to condemn or to go after those bad people in the Black and brown countries over there who are doing the real atrocities. And us over here, we protect human rights, and those people over there, they violate human rights. And I think that that has never been true. And we know from our ancestors and our movement leaders that that's not true. And so I gain a lot of inspiration from folks like the history you just named, the NAACP, getting stuck at advocacy within the United States and realizing, okay, well, if the United States wants to position itself as a world leader, we need to expose to the world how that's not true in order to put pressure on the US to actually live up to its commitments. The NAACP writes its appeal to the world in 1947 and sends it to the United Nations. Paul Robeson and other Black scholars write the We Charge Genocide document in 1951. And this idea was to put pressure on the United States, and it worked. There were other countries, particularly the Soviet Union at the time, that said, okay, well, United States, if y'all are going to be the leaders of freedom and democracy and human rights in the world, how are you lynching Black people in your streets? How are you having this police brutality or this racial apartheid system? And so this sort of appeal to the international community is something that's a tool that's always been there for us, and I think we need to tap back into it. And as we'll see on the next slide, I just want to maybe share a couple of things that are concrete in international human rights law that we can be thinking about as a movement. So one thing that I think folks don't know if you aren't steeped in the system is that when the United States signs one of these international human rights law conventions, it is a treaty, and so it has the force of federal law in the United States when the United States ratifies these treaties. And so one of these is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the right that's being violated, all of our rights that are being violated, is a right to receive information. And the Human Rights Committee talks about how countries can't restrict people's right to expression, and especially in a way that's targeted in a discriminatory way, which is exactly what's happening right now. The states are targeting people who do not share their preferred ideology, who do not share their preferred political views, and are targeting certain communities. And so that's a right that's obviously being violated under international law, and the United States is failing to uphold its human rights obligations. One other sort of tool that I would like to show, it's on the next slide for us, is the International Covenant on Ending Racial Discrimination. The United States actually ratified 30 years ago in 1994. And this one really goes right to the heart of the issue around Black studies, critical race theory. And you can see the language there. It says that countries who signed this, so the United States signed this and said, we agree with all the other countries that we should be doing this. We should educate the public about the importance of special measures aimed at remedying historical discrimination. That's teaching young people about why systemic racism exists. That's teaching young people about affirmative action. It's teaching them about historical racial injustices. And so these are the very things that are being taken away from us right now. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to know the specific laws, the specific provisions that are being violated, because what the United States is doing right now is in violation of international law.
Thank you for that, Detrey. It is so important to remind ourselves that what we're expecting, demanding, fighting for, isn't just, some preferences. It's not just our own story. These are rights that are protected and recognized in the international community. So it's incredibly helpful to be able to have this language and to recognize that this is part of a larger, broader, wider conceptualization of what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be a human protected by rights, and to have that language to be able to articulate it. I want to come back to you in a second because there is a question about why there has been such a separation between human rights and civil rights in the American consciousness, and of course what we are pressed to do about it now. But Kate, I want to come to you as an expert educator on atrocities, in particular atrocity prevention education. What does it have to tell us about some of the historic and global warning signs that are unfolding right here in the United States?
So first of all, I want to thank you so much, Kimberly, for being here. And I speak for educators across the United States when I just share our admiration for your work and appreciation for your research. And I want to also emphasize that the Educators Institute for Human Rights starts with the word educators because we are about teachers working with teachers. So when we are working internationally, we're not talking about working with major NGOs or international organizations. We're talking about working directly with teachers on the ground, people who know what happens in a classroom, and we all understand and can speak the same language. And it's so important to include teachers' voices in all of these conversations. But the main thing that we want to focus on is that these atrocities are not inevitable. And I don't believe that, we're sounding an alarm because we're seeing the warning signs that have led to atrocity in the past, but it doesn't mean that they have to right now. There are places where we can intervene, we can look at those warning signs, and we can stop things before they happen. And as you'll see in the next slide, internationally and historically, there are places where we could have intervened and recognized these warning signs. So for example, we see this book called The Poisonous Mushroom, which was produced by the Nazis as a way for young children, we're talking like pre-K through grade 5, to learn how to identify Jews and see how bad they are. And also you'll note that there's a hyperlink here. We have a short PowerPoint slide if anyone would like to look at it later, just a reminder of what propaganda is, what it means, and some examples. But it's so important to recognize that propaganda is a part of this, the scapegoating, the division between people in the same country. And we certainly are seeing deep division right now. And I think that's the thing that causes me great concern, is the depth of the division that we're seeing right now. We also see that there are past conflicts. We see that happen. They're like the lead up. So in the Holocaust, we saw pogroms across Europe, and they're isolated and they're one village at a time. We see the same thing in Rwanda. We see isolated attacks against Tutsis in different villages. And even in Ukraine, we have tended to forget that in 2014, the Russians took Crimea and they directly attacked Ukraine. And it was a precursor to what we're seeing happening now there. Mm-hmm. Preparations that we see, this is a photograph from Rwanda in 1994, and you can see the collection of machetes, and that was a major implement of genocide in that event. We're seeing preparations here in the United States, and I would also point out that I was in Rwanda 3 weeks ago and was asked by a television interviewer about, we only have 2 hours a week to teach about the genocide in Rwanda. And I looked at him and said, oh my gosh, you get 2 hours a week? We get nothing. Across the country, we do not get to talk about our dark past. Teachers are not required to talk about our history in any meaningful way. If it happens because individual districts or individual teachers take the action to make sure that accurate history is being taught. Now, the last piece of the warning signs historically and internationally is that it often happens under the umbrella of a wider conflict. So the photograph that you see here is of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this particularly is a photograph from Sarajevo. So we see that there's this major war going on as the former Yugoslavia is dissolving. And within that, camouflaged by that, masked by that, we see that there are atrocities happening that are ethnically motivated. So these 4 things are major warning signs internationally and historically.
Mhm. And so as you give us a sense of the international and historical ones, I'm sure that there are people who will nod their heads and they'll say, yes, yes, saw that in Bosnia. Yes, saw that, in other places, but that doesn't have anything to do with the United States. That's not us. What do you say to those people who say, not here, not us, not now?
I would say that there are plenty of warning signs here and now, and that will show up in the next slide. We can see that we see that deep division that I mentioned before. We see it on Facebook. So you can see that 2016, we're seeing the white nationalists. But as we looked at that poisonous mushroom book, we're also seeing that educational materials, not just the curriculum and not just people storming school boards, which are horrible in and of themselves, but there are actual materials that are being endorsed in 4 states, including Florida and Arizona. I know Florida's awful. Want to give a shout out to Arizona as well, where they need help. That we see this PragerU video that's part of, not just out there, but part of the curriculum for these states. And in this particular video that we've captured the image of, this is Christopher Columbus telling us that slavery is not so bad. And so we are minimizing the experience of American citizens who have stayed here throughout the worst of it and still want to be Americans, which is the thing that amazes me. And we're going to belittle that in what we teach to children through these materials. We see that past group violence happening in Charlottesville, and it's racially motivated, and it's anti-Semitic, and it's just hateful. And we see death and destruction happening even in that site, just because we want to take down a monument that elevates a Civil War, let's say the word, a traitor, a person who did not want to be a part of our country anymore. And we want to take that monument down, and this is the result. The preparations that we see here are, maybe they're not machetes, but you can see there's a young child at the Iowa State Fair, and they are preparing these children for this idea of Project 2025, this idea of turning over everything. All of the civil servants in the United States who have been there for decades and know how to, I don't know, just the basic stuff, how you get, a budget report into a different agency. But they're everyday workers, and we want to wipe them out. Just for starters, not to mention the fact that we want to turn over the entire US Constitution. And finally, I recognize that technically speaking, we would think of January 6th as another example of past group violence, except that we're hearing a major candidate for the United States presidency saying that if he loses the next election, we will not have the United States anymore.
He's saying the quiet part out loud.
I don't even think he's quiet about it anymore. I think he's just saying it out loud. So those are the warning signs that we're seeing. And again, I want to emphasize, it's not inevitable. We have a choice. We can take action. We can intervene. And teachers have a big role in that intervention.
Which is precisely why teachers are in the crosshairs.
Yes.
So Trey, let me come back to you. We just have one more minute here. It is not inevitable. And we recognize it's not impossible either to happen here. But one of the challenges is to connect the history we do have to the threat that we're facing. Precisely, the fact that many of the atrocities and the denial of democracy has happened in this country through the framing of white supremacy, through the idea that this country is not meant for everybody, but just for some people. What are some of the challenges to confronting that history, and some of the challenges to linking the human rights framework that seems to be out there and the racial justice framework that seems to be in here? It seems like these separations are actually mutually reinforcing. So what are they, and how can we bring them together?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what we're doing tonight is a big part of that. And I want to just start by sharing one quick story. at Human Rights Watch, we're working on a report right now that documents some of the harms of these educational censorship laws and sort of maps out the lack of robust federal response to these harms. And I've been spending the last few months talking to a lot of Black students and educators and parents. And I was talking to this one teacher, his name's Isaiah, and he lives in South Florida. And he's so inspiring. He wanted to be a teacher from when he was in high school, and he went to Florida A&M, HBCU there, and he studied history, and now he's back in the high school. He's teaching civics and U.S. history, and he talks about how he views his job is to teach his students to think critically about the world, to question the government, to question where it fails. He does these really amazing activities where he has his students look at the local city budget and they create their own version of it, or they create voters' guides for their parents. And it's this beautiful sort of melding of Black history, Black studies, civics, where he believes that the work he's living in the tradition of the freedom schools, where it was inextricably linked that democracy and Black history and Black studies, they all went together. So when they opened the freedom schools, they were teaching you about W.B. Du Bois and sort of Black thought, but they were also teaching you what your county commissioner does. And I think about Isaiah a lot and how he's under attack in Florida right now, but also the fact that not a lot of students in this country get that sort of education, and human rights law lays out a framework for us to ask for more than what we have. So it's not enough to just get these bans off the books. We can actually be pushing for leadership to say every student in this country should have access to an ethnic studies curriculum. Every student should have access to a Black studies curriculum. And there are already 19 states where this is true, but you can imagine federal leadership and funding to really push us further and to go past what we had before. When we were in 2020, when we were in 2015 or 2005, people weren't getting what we want. And so we need to put our proactive agenda out there. And I'll just close by saying that, human rights don't have to be out there. Human rights are ours. We make them, we claim them. And I think our movement, and you'll see a kind of slide on the next slide. These are photos of people all across our country who are starting to do that now. They're claiming these rights and they're making them real and they're making them mean something. And I think that's the task that we have ahead of us this summer, in November, and moving beyond that.
Thank you so much, Trey. And thank you, Kate. Thank you both for laying out the groundwork for the urgency of human rights in the U.S. now, and how human rights activists can get involved in order to incorporate that framework to address this current crises. So now I want to welcome Jocelyn Walker, the Vice President of Communications at the African American Policy Forum, to provide us with a tip of the week. How can we effectively bring these ideas that we are strategizing around to wider audiences? Take it away, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Professor Crenshaw. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with everyone to discuss this urgent issue. I'll be sharing the communication tips for this week and every week in the weekly Thursday homerooms from now until April 25th. So this is the first tip, but hope to see everyone back as the weeks continue on. Tonight's first communication tip will focus on the who and the what. So the who is driving the opposition narrative, and then what are the steps to begin building a proactive counter narrative? To counter the right's narrative attacks against DEI, racial justice, and democracy, we need to know who is driving it and what their key message is. So the first step to building a proactive narrative is to be curious and stay informed. That looks like watching your local news station on TV. That means it could look like listening to your local radio show station when you're on your way home from work, listening to a podcast while you're working out or cooking, reading trustworthy, unbiased online news pieces, going beyond what you may just see on the headlines or on social media. And so we talked about the who, and some of these are actually specific media clips that you may have seen or you may not have seen. Just today, University of Texas at Austin eliminated nearly 60 staff who once worked in DEI roles. And so the rights narrative is winning, and it is working, and it is tangibly impacting our lives. In the next slide, we will go into the what. Controlling the narrative, the story we tell about America's past and present, allows the right to discredit the basis for any efforts to equalize access and opportunity, and we can't let this happen. We need to be disciplined and coordinated in our message to get the story right and to counter the opposition narrative from the right by building a proactive counter narrative. That means reframing their efforts as censorship and an assault on free speech and thought, and centering the importance of anti-racist thinking and initiatives to the development of American democracy. The attacks on education started with anti-CRT and Stop Woke laws in Florida, but it doesn't end here. These are the same people looking to end all DEI efforts, overturn decades of civil rights laws, and create obstacles to voting that disproportionately impacts Black and Brown folks. Understanding racial justice as the key to democracy allows us to demonstrate how racial injustice is the key to authoritarianism. Next week, we'll get into the how of building a proactive narrative. And I'd like to close out the comm tips of the week with a quote from co-founder and executive director of African American Policy Forum, Kimberly Crenshaw. Not talking about racism does not destroy racism. Not talking about racism is a tool of racism. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Professor Crenshaw.
Thank you, Jocelyn, especially for driving home the point of how integral a solid communication strategy will be in moving forward. So in our next segment, we extend our conversation about the threats to our freedom to learn and democracy by welcoming Don Moynihan. Don's doing amazing research about the media's complicity in the attacks on our democracy. Don Moynihan is the inaugural McCourt Chair at McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown University. He also has an amazing Substack. So please, folks, remember to check that out. So Don, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I want to jump right in. When it comes to a recent example of the media's complicity in the attack against our institutions and democracy, this disturbing tweet from Christopher Rufo about how Gay's resignation is a scalping has to be considered Exhibit A. Ever since Rufo started this attack on critical race theory, his tactics seem to hide in plain sight. Can you describe more about how standard or mainstream media has helped to facilitate, enable these kind of attacks? And, in particular, this example of Claudine Gay probably, it's not the only example, but it's the one that most people seem to know about.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be part of this rich conversation, and so many things are sort of echoing here. And one of the points that was just talked about is to think about how to connect what's going on to counter narratives. And some of those counter narratives are pretty important. And so that to understand Rufo, and I'll talk a little bit about his role, it's good to go back and think about where he came from, which he was a guy who basically went on Fox News, complained about wokeness and CRT, and President Trump was watching, and that's how there was this executive order that banned critical race theory training in the US government. And so there's a connection here to a broader political movement, and that's partly what motivates the research that I'm engaged in. And so I think a lot about political institutions, especially government institutions. As I'll talk more in the next slide, the key claim I have in looking at the current moment is that the US is in this unusual period. There's certainly echoes from different points in the past, but what we're witnessing right now is this really different experience to maybe what most people expect and have seen from the past, where there's this direct attack on institutions by these right-wing political movements. And if you study outside of the US, some of these patterns are actually quite familiar. Some of the tactics are tactics that we see in authoritarian regimes. And so the next slide, I sort of break down a couple of those. One is delegitimization. So attacking those regimes or attacking those institutions like government institutions, libraries, educational institutions, ones that people normally trust, with these sort of rhetorical strategies alleging that they're corrupt, trying to undermine that trust, deconstructing those institutions, trying to reduce capacity, trying to make them less effective, attacking individual actors within those institutions. And then the third tactic is control. So asserting some sort of direct political control that's answerable to the authoritarian regime. And so I think, as I mentioned in the next slide, you see aspects of that in the Claudine Gay case. We see another tweet here from Rufo, where he's very explicit in telegraphing his tactics. As you say, they're in plain sight. He's saying, we're launching this story, plagiarism story from the right, and we're going to get the media involved and do the work for us. And to be very clear, the objection to Gay here on the part of Rufo and the people that supported him was not really about Gay's views about the Middle East or campus protests, or really her record of scholarship, or about plagiarism. Those were all opportunities for them to go after Gay for what they perceived as her bigger sin, which is her support as dean for DEI and then as Harvard president. And they also saw her as a DEI pick for this very prestigious role and objected to her being in that position. And Rufo was very successful with that tactic. With Gay, the New York Times in particular incessantly flogged that story for over a month until Gay resigned. And I think if the most powerful news media organization in the world asks every day, is your tenure under threat? Should you resign? Sooner or later, the people that work for you or the donors in your outside your organization or your board starts asking the same question, and it becomes really difficult to maintain your position with those types of accusations. And one of the things I mentioned about in writing about this case is that we can see parallel accusations of academic misconduct from, for example, the president of Stanford, that got no attention in the New York Times until he resigned, or Judge Gorsuch, who was also accused of plagiarism, got almost zero attention during his nomination. And so there was a track record of responding to these accusations of plagiarism in the mainstream media and treating them in context, asking if they were politically motivated. But that strategy just didn't seem to apply to Gay. Gay was held to a much different standard. And I think it is, and Rufo is pretty explicit about this, because of her association with DEI.
And, one of the attacks, of course, on DEI-related concepts might help explain why the New York Times was so focused on Gay and not any of the other cases. We don't get a chance under this new regime to talk about implicit biases or to talk about the makeup of, the editorial pages and the newsroom. So this appears to simply be the product of good reporting as opposed to the frameworks that tell people what's important and what's not, that sometimes are implicitly shaped by race. You've published in your Substack the media complicity against attacks against racial justice and education and democracy more broadly. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about the strategy that has been tried and tested, as Christopher Rufo said, and now how it's being deployed to target other university faculty, officials, programs, an entire orientation around inclusive education and institutions.
Yeah, I think the strategy that Rufo follows is pretty consistent over time, which is you build a negative brand and you contort the meaning of that brand, you make people fearful about it, and you repeat the brand relentlessly. And he did that with CRT. He sort of took that and tried to make this as negative and scary sounding a brand as possible. And he did it with plagiarism. And so he used plagiarism as sort of a wedge issue to go after these scholars. He did it again a couple of weeks ago, and I think successfully with Gay, because the media went along with it and treated this as sort of a national news story. He did it more recently with another scholar who I happen to know slightly. She wrote an article for a symposium that I wrote, that I edited for the Russell Sage Foundation. She's an excellent scholar. Christina Cross she's a sociologist at Harvard, and she is a Black scholar. She studies demography, family formation issues. Some of her works relates to race, but it seemed very much that she was being targeted because she is a Black scholar at Harvard, a female Black scholar, and this fit into the Claudine Gay narrative that Rufo was trying to build. And in this case, the attack just was less successful. The strategy was the same, which was there are these anonymous complaints. Someone has launched a complaint to some official at Harvard saying Christina Cross has engaged in plagiarism. She needs to be investigated. And you just report the complaint with very little context. You don't say who launched the complaint. You hope that the media will pick this up. On social media, you can amplify this. So Elon Musk is replying to Rufo's tweets about Christina Cross. And so it gets, the millions of impacts when people are seeing those tweets. But ultimately, it didn't really work quite as well in this case. The mainstream media did not pick it up. I sort of did a quick search on what media outlets covered the Cross story. There's a couple from Harvard Crimson and Rufo's own journal of choice, which is City Journal, which is published by the Manhattan Institute, a right-wing think tank organization. But it doesn't get broader pickup from that. And I think that's partly because there was, maybe not directly from Harvard, which could have done a lot better in this case, but among other scholars, a fairly rapid pushback where scholars said, this is a ridiculous set of claims. You're saying Christina Cross engaged in plagiarism when most of what she did was simply repeat data set names or standard methodological terms, and we don't consider that to be plagiarism. And I think that sort of visible pushback really made a difference in this case.
And it's such a valuable lesson, too, as we reflect back on how quickly the fire that started with the attacks on critical race theory were able to take hold, partly because the response was more of a pivot rather than a direct confrontation in the way that we saw happening in this particular case. So hopefully, lesson learned. In our last minute, I'm wondering if you could help us think about some of the ways in which the right is now coming together with a blueprint for what their objectives are in the case of a victory, a Trump victory in 2025. It's actually called Project 2025. So can you just give our listeners some of the alarming things that you've uncovered that is in Project 2025?
Yeah, and I'll just talk through the next slide and leave it at that. But I think there are three big themes that you're seeing. One is reliance on conspiracist messaging that also has a strong racial element, which emphasizes us versus them messaging, and also restricts discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion or structural racism. And then you're seeing two other things happening. There's sort of an outside game where people like Rufo are going after individual actors. And so he's going after scholars, but in other cases, people are going after election officials or school board officials or people who are librarians. And so really scaring them, putting them under this unwelcome spotlight, presenting them as radical. And then the third strategy is playing an inside game where you're using political power to weaken institutional protections, rob people of, say, their job protections, limit what they can talk about. And what with Project 2025, what we're seeing here is the reliance on something called Schedule F, which I've written about a lot, but basically the ability to turn career civil servants into political appointees and then make them fireable at will. So President Trump could fire 50,000 political appointees once he has converted them from being career civil servants. And that's going to be a dramatic change in how American government works if that strategy comes to pass.
Wow. So this is effectively why we're doing this. We want people to fully understand, what is at stake. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope we can call on you again to help us both with media literacy and just understanding the way that our democracy is under assault. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So I'm now going to pivot to Gina Loring. Gina is an artist in residence at the African American Policy Forum. She will provide us with some poetic grounding as we move forward in our organizing efforts. Gina.
Good evening, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. So this poem is called Freedom to Learn, Freedom to Learn, Freedom to Learn. Pretending something doesn't exist doesn't make it so. Your desperation to preserve your privilege has blinded you into believing you can rewrite history. That by your own hands, you can erase entire chapters.
That's Gina. Gina, the lady you met at the door.
Tearing out pages from a book does not change the story. Does not complete decades of disenfranchisement. Dynasties built on broken backs and stolen breath. You are at war with your own fragility. Denial and deflection are a delusion. As if the past does not become the present, does not become the future, does not become the past, does not become the present, does not become the future, and repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats until it is called to a reckoning. This is modern day McCarthyism. Manufactured momentum of misinformation, manipulating masses, making accuracy an imaginary enemy, fictional fear-based fabrication. You vilify the most vulnerable, most marginalized. When it was you who committed fraud and thievery beyond measure, you who created the social structures you blame on those to whom you are most in debt. Maybe it's repressed regret from which your fears flow. Grievances grown from centuries of unethical existence. Listen, fish do not know they are in water, for it has always just been so. You are swimming in the certainty of a safety we have never known, crusading against consciousness, the very thing that will liberate you from your colossal karmic dues. You made literacy illegal for 400 years, one of many tactics of injustice, and we still thrived intellectually. Ask Frederick Douglass. Now you want to make it illegal to read and write about when it was illegal for us to read and write? What kind of oxymoronic merry-go-round of moral bankruptcy is this reality? No accountability, an entire planet poisoned. Cognitive dissonance, colonization, control, come up to the light to be transformed, made whole, shouted from the rooftops, reveal it to heal it. Minds are to impression as paper is to pen. Dr. King, the original CRT scholar, said, truth, trust to the ground, will rise again. There is no silencing us. The descendants of survivors of the Middle Passage, the Holocaust, the Trail of Tears, the Tulsa Massacre, no thin-skinned politicians scared of their own shadow will deter us after all we've been through. Shame on you. Weaponizing laws, rebranding bigotry in bills and propositions patterned like their predecessors, post-Civil War, Reconstruction era terrorism, lynchings, and Jim Crow. We know this cycle well. Nothing but the same wolf in new sheep's clothes, the latest iteration in a long line of low blows. You can't take the Hunani K. Trask, Howard Zinn, James Baldwin kind of truth. Those who unapologetically pull back the curtain of propaganda, legal jargon, malarkey, patriotism that looks a lot like its root, patriarchy. 1,000 laws would not be enough to erase the universe's memory. Her records cannot be dissolved. You are shouting at thunder, fists shaking at the sky. You can try and try, but your efforts will wash away with the wind, fall to the ground with the weight of your sins. What arrogance to think you are more powerful than all that there is or ever was. Better to face the facts. There's no way around them, no loophole, no hack, no hiding place from freedom. The pendulum always swings back.
Woo, thank you. Thank you, Gina. You always step in and make real the fact that poetry is not a luxury. It is a key pillar of our movement. So thank you so much for bringing that fire.
Thank you, my pleasure.
I am so delighted now to bring in a different kind of fire. I want to welcome Tim Wise for his segment called White Lies Matter. Tim Wise is a leading anti-racist educator who is helping to crystallize why racial justice is at the center of this fight for democracy. He's one of the most prominent anti-racist writers and educators in the United States. This is my favorite one. In 2016, The Root anointed him as one of the 8 wokest white people we know. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. But can I just say, before we get into the stuff we were going to talk about, I thought you and I were cool, but you set me up. I'm having to follow Gina, and I don't think that's remotely fair. It's like, why am I following a brilliant poet? Like, I'm going to come in here with my white guy shit or whatever I'm going to do, and it's going to be good, I think, because I've sort of practiced it, but it's not going to be as good as that. So next time we got to, like, I don't know, like, I agreed to this format, and I feel like it was a good format until about 2 minutes ago, and now it's awful. Like,
it's not awful.
it's fine.
Somebody's got to do it. Someone is always having to follow Gina, but you know, it's flavor, it's flavor, it's flavor.
Oh,
It's
good.
it works. So look, we know that the right has been banning children's books about the civil rights movement. They've been banning all discussions about systemic racism. They've been threatening to have teachers who teach these things fired, and lately have been calling on them to even be arrested. Now they're saying they're doing it to stop critical race theory. But look, critical race theory has been around for 40 years. No one saw a crisis for 40 years. So it raises the question, why now? Why suddenly are they so concerned about young people learning about racism, or concerned about having a framework for understanding it?
Right. Well, first thing important to know is that it's not about CRT. And they admit that in their more honest moments. Chris Rufo, who I know we sometimes don't use his name, we refer to him as he who shall not be named, or Voldemort or whatever, but that's sort of unfair to Voldemort. So I'm just going to call him by his name. Chris Rufo, has led this attack on anti-racist education. And he has said, his own words, that he, quote, doesn't give a shit, end of quote, about the actual arguments of critical race theory. He says it is just a term that he wants to weaponize because it sounds academic and, intellectual or whatever, and that's supposed to be bad. And it sounds radical, and it's easy to remember, and it can serve as like a stand-in for anything remotely progressive having to do with race. So even Black History Month, for example, last year, there were people in Alabama that wrote the Attorney General and were like, this is some CRT. Black History Month is critical race. That's, the kind of thing that ends up flowing from this. So it's not about CRT. It's really about one thing, 2 words, border control. What I mean by that is this. Just as these people want to control the physical borders of the country with walls and deportation orders, they also want to control the narrative border, right? The story that we tell about America. Because if young people learn about the history of racial injustice and its legacy, they might want to do something about it. And we saw that, right? When millions of people took to the streets in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And the right saw that too, and it scared them. And that's why they're banning educational materials about racism, because you cannot fix what you cannot see. So if we don't see or learn about systemic racism, we can't even acknowledge in some states now that it's a thing or has ever been a thing, then we're not going to come up with policies to counter it. And just as a side note, even MLK would have to be canceled under the right wing's approach, because remember what King said in his last written essay, which appeared in Playboy magazine in early '69. And I only know about that because I read it for the articles, and that's a joke only somebody over 45 will understand. But in early 1969 in Playboy, they published his last written essay. And what he said in that essay was that the majority of white America was, quote, poisoned to its soul, end of quote, by racism, and that racism was, quote, as native to our soil as pine trees, sagebrush, and buffalo grass, end of quote. That is critical race theory. It's also truth. And in about 24 states, it's illegal to say any of that in a classroom right now.
Ooh, and you know, that is just the tip of the iceberg. So we know they're working hard to discredit any substantive attempts to address racial inequity at the policy level, whether it's DEI, it's affirmative action, really anything that looks at racial disparities with the goal of trying to remedy them. So on one hand, they're trying to ban awareness of the problem in schools, but then just in case kids find out on their own somehow, it's as though they want to have a plan B to make sure, like any possible policy effort attempt to remedy those problems are viewed as unacceptable. So can you give us some examples of how they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually worse than that in some ways. They don't just want young people to ignore racism against people of color or oppose things like affirmative action. They've always opposed that stuff. Now what they want is for everybody to see white people as the actual victims and to blame virtually every problem that white people might have on Black and brown folks or on DEI efforts. So, you know, if you didn't get the job you want, well, it must be because they gave it to a DEI hire or because some undocumented immigrant, quote, took your job, end of quote, which is sort of a fascinating concept, right? Like, was the job yours actually? Like, did you get it and then some dude from Juarez took it from you? Like, because if you didn't have the job yet, it wasn't yours by definition, right? I mean, did they hire you on Monday and then on Tuesday, the boss calls you in the morning and he's like, look, Chad, we were totally sold on you. And then this weird thing happened. This guy walked over the border this morning and we think we're just going to go with him. But listen, champ, thanks for applying and best wishes in your job search. Like, is that what actually happens in this country? Of course not. But that's what they want us to think. Or if your taxes are too high, same thing, right? Well, it must be because all those people of color are taking your money for some welfare program. The same people of color they just told you took your job and take all the jobs, but they apparently also take none of the jobs because they're just so quote unquote lazy. They want to sit around sucking up public benefits all day, which is a really hard combo to pull off, taking all the jobs and none of the jobs. But perhaps these are like the hardest working lazy people in the history of the world. Who knows? It doesn't have to be consistent. It just has to get people angry. Or it gets better than that, Kim, because, you know, I'm on a roll now and I'm just going to keep doing this. So you have a Boeing jet that loses an emergency exit door in the middle of the flight. Now, you might think to yourself, what does that have to do with DEI? Nothing, of course, but it must be because Boeing has a DEI program to try to bring in Black pilots. That makes sense. The right literally said this when that accident happened, because as we all know, Black pilots are the ones who are responsible for installing the doors on the plane when they're not flying them, I guess. Or it gets better because just last week when the bridge in Baltimore fell down when it was hit by a barge, we were told by people on the right, these same people, that it was because of the DEI mayor. Because I think we all know that, like, if the mayor were white, he would have fortified the bridge with his magical white guy brain power. I mean, we all know that disasters absolutely never happen under white leadership, unless you consider the Great Chicago Fire, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, our entire involvement in Vietnam, 9/11, tornadoes in Oklahoma, or hurricanes in Texas and Florida. But like, other than that, pretty much nothing right? Now, putting the absurdity aside, and I do think it's important to mock these people for their ridiculousness, putting that aside, all of this is calculated to pit us against each other. If the right can get white people thinking that our enemies are black and brown, then maybe we won't pay attention as they push through more tax cuts for the rich, assault public education, restrict women's reproductive freedom, undo the civil rights gains of the 20th century, along with labor laws, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, environmental regulations, because that's what they're about. And they admit it. If you read that Project 2025 document from the Heritage Foundation, and I don't recommend it, particularly if you want to get any sleep for the next week, because it'll keep you up for months, but they are waving around their blueprint like some demented architect who is looking to build the absolute worst house ever constructed. They are telling us what they want to do. It is all a distraction in public, though. So don't fall for it. It's up to all of us to expose them for who they are and what they're about. And I appreciate the opportunity to rant with you here on this important homeroom event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the rant. Thank you for the White Lies Matter segment, highlighting the absurdity, and at the same time reminding us that you can't change a problem that you can't see and you can't name. And this is precisely why we're having these weekly homerooms until May 3rd. So thanks again, Tim. We're looking forward to your weekly segment. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kay, who will be highlighting our activation tip of the week. Kay, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I already can tell you what my new favorite segment is. White Lies Matter. It's something I have to tune in for every single week. So thank you for that. I also want to just thank everyone for what we've heard so far. And I'm excited about giving you the activation tip of the week. Every week, I'm going to come and give you just an idea of what you can do to motivate and activate your base, give you a little bit of news to get you started, give you a little bit of idea about what you can do to move forward. We are at a critical moment where we must do everything we can to activate and motivate our base so that they can make a plan to activate, to attend every single one of our homerooms, April 11th, 18th, and 25th. Starting at 8 p.m. right here on Zoom. And we want to make sure that we can make a plan for what we're going to do on May 3rd and beyond. I know that can be a little challenging to get folks activated. So we want to also hear from you. Any tips that you have, just uplift them to me and I will try to provide them out to the group every single Thursday. I also want to highlight very quickly just our partners and what they're doing. This week, I want to start with Dorothy Bulwar, the special projects editor from the Afro newspaper. Dorothy, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me, Dorothy.
I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. We're just going to give people just kind of a 1-minute tip every time we highlight a partner. So last year, the Afro partnered with the National Women's Studies Association, NWSA, and you published our weekly statements every single week about the National Day of Action. Very quickly, can you provide us with one tip that you would give to someone who works in the press or who's working alongside someone who works in the press on how to collaborate on a project of this magnitude for the National Day of Action?
Sure, I would love to have shared the project and maybe in the future going forward with a journalism school at one of the area universities and have some interns actually do live interviews and run stories every week leading up to the deadline.
All right. Thank you so much, Dorothy. I appreciate you coming on. That's from the Afro newspaper, having something published every single week. The Afro published just a very short 750-word statement from us. It gave people an idea of how to follow along. And finally, I want to spotlight Ashley Daniels, the project director for Black Girls Vote Research Network. How are you, Ashley?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing?
I am doing well. So last year, Black Girls Vote participated in an all-day activation at Loyola University, Maryland. You did an all-day teach-in. You also got people signed up to vote. Can you please just very quickly, just give us a sense of what we can do to motivate and activate college students to be actively involved in this work?
Absolutely. So the thing with Black Girls Vote is that we are always, very active in the community, and with our main focus being on young Black women and femmes between the ages of 18 to 25. So whenever we do tabling, our approach is usually, twofold. So you want to have a takeaway and things to take. So the takeaway essentially for us was, to talk about how this crisis impacts us on a political level. So what are some of the things about school boards? What are the things about, some of the elected officials that are really reiterating this problem, through policy? And then we also have, so that's the takeaway. But then when we have our things to take, we always provide some sort of resource guide or some resources on how you can continue to have those conversations. And one of the things that we did in addition to the day-long, teaching, which we did wonderfully with Loyola, was that we comprised a resource guide that is on our website, Black Girls Vote, that talks about, the freedom to learn issue essentially and what you can do about it. Because again, the big thing with Black Girls Vote is we're giving you this information, but we want you to do something with it. So we really just, emphasize what do you do with this information? So yeah, those are my 2 tips.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I appreciate you for coming up and just spotlighting your work. That was Black Girls Vote. So giving people a takeaway and something to take. So planning for people to walk away with information. And Dorothy from the Afro, making sure you're covering this in the press, even from low-hanging fruit, which is a small kind of statement, to an ongoing story. Finally, folks, making sure your base knows about our homerooms, planning a watch party, getting everyone you know to come and join you every single Thursday of the month of April, starting at 8 p.m. Come, get activated, and get motivated. It will be very helpful as we go forward to think about what we can do to own our circles, to own our communities, and to be actively involved on May 3rd. We will spotlight more of you during our homerooms next week. So please stay tuned for that. Send your tips to me and I will make sure that I uplift them. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Kim to provide us some closing remarks. Kim, thank you for coming back up to the stage.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you all are as energized and activated as I am coming out of this first homeroom. We're excited to have 3 more homerooms leading up to May 3rd, one on April 11th, April 18th, and April 25th. As I mentioned earlier in the program, next week's homeroom will be dedicated to discussing Freedom Summer 2024 and marking 60 years since Freedom Summer 1964. I'm so excited to announce that we'll be joined by veteran members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Charles Cobb and Judy Richardson. They'll share their insights on Freedom Summer and this anniversary. We'll also be partnering with our good friends, the Zen Education Project. They'll be highlighting why education can be the site either of our oppression or our liberation. We have to be the ones to decide which. So you definitely don't want to miss next week. RSVP now. The Eventbrite is already available. Last year, we had educators, students, librarians, mothers, sisters, granddaughters, fathers, people of all walks of life joining us for these weekly homerooms leading up to May 3rd. It truly does take a village to get the ball rolling on organizing, on planning, strategizing. So please, please, please share what you learned today with those around you and help us build momentum to respond effectively. We're at a critical juncture at the survival of our democracy. The warning signs, as we heard earlier, they're flashing and the alarm bells are ringing. This is the connection between the attack on anti-racism, the attack on democracy. We can't save one without the other. This is why we urgently need to get together on May 3rd and to commence with Freedom Summer 2024. We've got to create what the late John Lewis called some good trouble. You've got your marching orders. I hope to see you next week. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
is truly wasted. There's no guarantee.